I'm Megan. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about your books.
Hi, Kelly. I'm really glad to be here.
So this is a little different. I have a podcast, as you know, and I talk with women authors of nonfiction books. But your books are different from my normal books. We are going to talk about all of those and your journey. So first, I want to start with you don't just have like one book to talk about. You have how many books have you published?
I'm just publishing my fifth one right now.
Okay, okay. And lots of children's books, it looks like. So tell me a little bit about kind of that first book that you wrote and why you wrote it and what it's about.
All right, so the first book that I published was called FIFO Saves the Day. And that was book number one in the Supply Jane and FIFO adventures, which is now a trilogy. So that accounts for three of the five books. And it's a kid's book, it's a picture book that teaches kids about supply chain management. So pretty niche, but super fun to write. The whole series it's been really fun to write, and it's been really fun to connect. So I spent 10 years in the corporate world in supply chain and analytics. And so it was really fun when I left the corporate world, became an author. I thought, oh, I'm going to have to build a completely new network, which I did. But it was really fun to relate to some of my colleagues and people from my old world of supply chain in a new way as a kids' book author.
Okay, so I was going to ask, like, why supply chain? Okay, but that was the background where you were working before. So, what made you want to create? So that was your first book, but then your other books are also, you said that you have a series, so they're similar in topic, similar in target audience. So what made you want to teach kids about supply chain management? What was going on in your brain that you wanted to pursue that? Because it's just such an interesting niche that you got into there.
I'm sure you've heard the phrase, explain it to me like I'm five, which is, especially in the corporate world, this is, you go into a meeting and it's like, oh, this is a very complicated subject. Explain it to me like I'm five. And in meetings, I hated that because it's like, you're not five, you are a seasoned executive. Like, you can understand the intricacies of what I'm talking about. But that type of communication and that being able to distill a complicated message down into something that's 24 pages or 500 words, it's a challenge and it's fun. And I was already starting to do some of that. And then I'm not 100% sure how I made the leap to like a dog and a like purple haired little girl who were going on adventures to embody those adventures. But I did. And it's been so much fun. It's a different, I was so used to spreadsheets and PowerPoints. And so this is a completely different medium.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned going from being in corporate to writing these books, and you actually left your corporate job to pursue this writing journey. Is that right?
That is right. Just about, I keep looking down at the calendar or the date in the corner of my screen, but I just realized it's been 5 years and 1 month since I did this.
Wow.
So a nice little round anniversary.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked with authors for 20 years, and so many authors would love to give up their day job and be a full-time writer. So, how did you take that leap?
The, I had to trick myself into the initial leap. Like, once I was in the water, it was fine. But the way that I actually decided, okay, I'm gonna actually go in, I'm gonna try this. I gave myself 1 year. I didn't say I'm quitting my job forever. I'm kind of like ripping up my resume and like burning all my bridges. I said, I will take 1 year to see how this writing thing works. And after that, I can always go back and get another job. I will still be very employable. And so that gave me the time bounding. Like, that seemed like a small enough risk to take. And so I did this. I called it my year of becoming an author. I had an acronym and everything. And so my YOBA, year of becoming a writer, came and went, and I just kept going.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. So, you have the series with the supply chain and a couple more books that you mentioned that are not for children. So, tell me about that writing journey. So, you wrote these children's books and then some additional fiction books as well.
Yep. So my first novel is called Firebrand, and it's a cozy mystery about a girl who gets her MBA and her first big corporate job and then has to solve a mystery. Somewhat autobiographical, although I didn't really have to, I don't remember any huge mysteries that I had to solve. But that was so I was writing that novel, like that first novel, most first novels, I like to think take forever. And so this one, I started it as a way to work through all of the absurdities that I was seeing at the office every day. So I wrote probably 80% of that book on the train to and from work. And it was nice because I was always writing that. The kids' books, like they're short. I wrote the text for most of them, and it took probably 2 hours of work all total. And then finding the illustrator, getting everything like from the time that I wrote it to the time it was on the shelves was much longer and much more effort. But the creative, like the kind of creative ask was much smaller for the kids' books, and that gave me time to work on the novel. And so that came out no, 2 summers ago actually, and I'm working on the sequel now, which will hopefully take less time than the first one, but they always take longer than you think.
Yeah, sure. Now, how did you publish all of your books?
I'm an independent publisher. So
Okay.
I prefer that term to self-publish. But I started a publishing company, basically. And so I do all of the things that a self-published author would do, but I just do it under a company umbrella. And the fact that I have a little bit larger library makes it, in some ways it's good, in some ways because the books are like I don't have a super consistent brand if it was just me as an author. And so as a publisher, I can say like all of these books do have some similarities. They're sort of about they balance life and work, or they explore the hidden logic of the world or the workplace.
Yeah. Now, I know that you have a Substack, so I want to talk a little bit about that. How have you used Substack to promote your books?
I use Substack as a newsletter provider first and foremost. And this has really just in the last I would say 6 months, because before that I was using MailChimp, and it's fine, but I always found it a little bit unwieldy. I had to have the plugin that worked with the website. I had to, like all of the pieces should have worked together, and I'm sure it was user error, but I just found it a little clunky. And it would take me a long time to drag and drop all the elements to make it look nice. So I stumbled on Substack, and I've had a blog for forever. And right now I have one blog that is very blog. It's just articles and essays and that sort of thing. But then I have a separate publication, which Substack makes really easy, where I could import my entire current email list, and it does everything that MailChimp did. It'll send a welcome email. It'll send, like, you can set up trickles, you can set up if you've got a freebie or a lead magnet, you can set that up too. But I find it a much more user-friendly platform.
Well, that's interesting because I have struggled with Substack and I don't know why. Every time I go into it, I'm just like, I cannot figure out what I'm supposed to be doing or how to use this. But I didn't really know the importing your email list into that. So that's interesting. What other tips do you have for somebody who, like me, just doesn't get it? Well, how do you start like poking around in there and trying to figure it out?
There's a couple of different ways. One way is to treat it like a social media channel. And that, if you want to do that, then the same tips that would work on Instagram or Facebook or anywhere else apply. You go in and you use the Substack notes feature, you read people's essays and you comment, and you especially use their notes is like a Twitter or Threads or something like that. It's much more quick and more conversational. And so that is one good way to find people that are in your same field, your same domain, your same genre. And then you can start interacting with them and building up an audience within the Substack world. But that is it's quite self-contained. And I find this a little confusing too, where a subscriber is different than a follower. And so there are people who will see what you write and what you publish within the Substack app. But then there are all the people who don't really know what Substack is, but they're still getting your newsletter in their email inbox. And so it's nice for that because it works for both. And you've got people who can just read as they've always read your newsletter, but then there's this extra layer on top with the social
Okay.
element.
Okay. Yeah, I think I just need to I've been telling myself this for months. Like I just need to get in there and play with it and just poke around and see. Like I'm a big social media person. Like I love all social media and I'm big on everything. Like that is one platform I have just been like, I don't get it. I had mentioned to you that I have several women in my author power circle who are interested in Substack. Some of them have Substack, some of them are active on there, but others are like thinking about it. Yeah, I think it's a great tool for authors. That's what I keep hearing. I just can't figure it out myself. So I think I am following you on there. I subscribe to yours and then yeah, I just get things I'm like, I don't know. But anyway, I will push myself to try that. What other tactics you have all of these books and you're able to make a living off of this. What other tips do you have when it comes to marketing? What are the other things that you do to get the word out about your books?
I heard this tip very early on and took it to heart, and that is niche down and then niche down again. And I'm actually quite lucky that I sell kids books about supply chain management because that entire category is about 5 books wide, and I have 3 of them. Like it's a small audience, but I can get pretty good penetration into that group. And if I like on LinkedIn and with some of the, it's taken me a little bit of time, but this group of parents who work in the industry or I've got quite a few like academics. But so if you can find your people and like the smaller the group of people, the better actually. Because then you can it's more targeted as opposed to just like broad hoping somebody wants to read your rom-com. So that's my biggest tip is find the smallest, yeah, niche down and then niche down again. Find your people and then
Yeah.
focus on them.
Yeah, just being in marketing, people have concerns about that all the time. If I have this niche, I'm like excluding all other things that, so usually like in my world is we're talking about business services, right? But marketing book is the same thing. It's finding that, like you said, like that very you say niche. I like hate this word. I always want to say I say it different depending on how I'm using it, but anyways, niche, whatever. But yeah, so it's hard to do that. But when it comes to writing though, like you have to do that before you even write your it's not just the marketing of services. Like in this case, it's like, who your book is going to appeal to. Do you have any recommendations for people? It seems like you just fell into yours based on what you were doing. But are there ways that people can, I don't know, find that niche that makes the most sense for them and that it would make the most sense to pursue?
That's a really It's an interesting question because it depends on your goals, I think. Because I know, especially in the fiction world, there's a whole school where it's you basically look at the tropes that are playing well like that month or that year on Amazon and you write to the audience. And I think that's just a completely different perspective than I have. Like I write, and my bias is write what you want to write. And if it's something that you like, there's 8 billion people in the world. And even if, even if there's only a handful of them, like if you like it, somebody else will like it. And so it puts more pressure, like once you have a finished product, you have to work even harder to find those people. And I think I might do that a little bit too much. I think there's probably some benefit in thinking about this as you're writing and trying to say, okay, like how can I appeal to, make it a little bit broader? And I think especially for nonfiction and for a lot of books, you can't write a good book if you don't have some sort of target audience in mind, I think. So it's just oscillating back and forth between who am I writing for? What do I want to write? And then like hopefully at some point they merge into a nice little bubble of potential readers.
Okay, so I want to dig into that a little bit more too, because I have somebody we were actually just talking about this in my author power circle where one of the women We asked her, okay, so she wants to write a book. She has these blog posts and she wants to turn those into a book. And we asked her, okay, so who's your audience? Who are those blog posts for? It's for everyone. And we were like who, and we were having great conversations around it. And she was understanding like, oh, I do need to figure out what that is. But like, how do you, I guess I just want to talk more about that. Just, I don't know, having a defined audience before you write your book or while you're writing your book, like it helps you speak directly to that person in whatever you're putting together. I don't know. I guess just what other like tips do you have for people on how did you do that? When you were writing your book, you knew it's going to be children, it's going to be supply chain focused, but the children aren't the ones buying your books. You also have to appeal to the buyer of the book as well, right? Like, how did you think through that early on in the process of writing those books?
Honestly, in the like for the first book, I really didn't. Like I wrote this fun little story and thought, oh, this has some potential. And so this is why I'm saying like maybe don't kind of do exactly what I did, but I was able to find at the end of it, I was able to find other people like reverse engineer my target audience. But I think then with my subsequent books, it was a little bit more intentional. And some of it is, I mean, a lot of it, like my latest book that I have coming out is it's a picture book, but it's much more like you're saying, it's aimed at adult. I think kids will like it. It'll be a nice little bedtime story, but it's got a message that's a little bit more for the parents. And I'm positioning that as a gift for BA grads or a gift for like data scientists or something like that. But so that's one where I know there's a group of people. In fact, it's a Discord server. There's a very specific community that I was writing this book for. And it's one that I know them. I know a little bit about how this community thinks and works. And I thought this is something that they're really gonna, and we'll see if they actually do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this was probably the closest where I had a persona in mind, not one person with a name, but kind of people who like this, who are part of this community or this little section of Twitter are really going to like this book.
Yeah. Yeah. With the children's books again, like how did you, what am I trying to ask? So these books, we talked about having a niche and being, how there's 5 books in your niche and you have 3 of them or whatever those numbers actually are. But how did you find the people to buy it? Because that seemed you were maybe writing your book for fun, not for I'm going to make a career out of this. But so you weren't worried about that at the time. But then you're having success with your book marketing. And how did you find those right people? When you were talking about Discord, that wasn't for your supply chain books, right?
No, the supply chain books, like LinkedIn was my main
Oh yeah, you
channel.
mentioned that. Okay.
And it was very much, and I found this in other elements too. It's so second order connections are the most helpful, like people that you know or you've worked with in the past. But I had a few people, who knew me well enough. And when they saw this, they were like, oh, Megan wrote a book. Let me check it out. And then they were I had a few like very early, strong supporters. And that was really what sort of launched it.
Okay. Okay. And then they helped spread the word, or did they buy in bulk? Like how did that work?
They helped spread the word, for one thing. And they were, they were very well connected in the industry. So they were and I think so a couple of them were academics, and academia is a pretty close-knit community anyway. So that was one, we started covering that area over there. And then there were a few people high up in like trade associations too. And that was another element that worked pretty well. And to be honest, like the books are fun, and they're great, but a lot of the ROI, even from the kids' books, was I got a couple of consulting gigs out of them. So even though they're fiction, bedtime stories for kids, they kind of work to market me as well as just themselves.
It shows your expertise because if you're able to write on that topic, you know the topic that you're talking about. So that's interesting. What else do you do on a regular basis to market your books?
I'm sporadic on social media. What I really enjoy doing, and This is a little difficult because I live in Switzerland. My main market, of course, is in the US, but I love doing events. And there are enough story times at libraries and at bookstores. But every time I'm back in the US, or even if I'm traveling somewhere else, I will call up bookstores and say, "Hey, I happen to be in town. Do you need someone to show up on this Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m. or whatever?" And four out of 10 times they'll say yes. So it's a higher hit rate than I would think. And so if I send out enough kind of cold emails, someone will say like, "Sure, come on over." And like that's the fun part of writing, because there's a lot of marketing that is necessary and very important, but I get the payoff when I'm actually in front of kids and reading the books. And
Yeah. Yeah. That's fun. Last question about your books. So how did you handle the illustrations? You didn't illustrate them, did you?
I did not illustrate them. I have an illustrator. Her name is Aneta Amersdorfer, and I've been working with her for 5 years now, more than 5 years, actually, because we started before I quit my corporate job. But I found her on Upwork, which is a freelancer platform. And my initial idea was, oh, I'm going to have to storyboard out every single page, exactly what I want, and then someone can just go and clean it up. And that was not the case. She is such an artist, such a professional, such an expert in visual storytelling that it's been such a joy to work with her and she'll come up with things that bring the story to life that I hadn't even thought of. So it's been really rewarding.
That's great. I know a lot of people have reached out to me about how do I find an illustrator? Because people want to write a children's book, but it's like an important part of the process for putting together a children's book. So yeah, great to know. And her name is actually on your Amazon listings for the book, so people can find her or use that tip to find somebody on Upwork or a freelancer platform like that.
Yep. And
Great.
I'm working on building up, because I can write kids books pretty, like, a lot faster than they can be illustrated. And so I'm working on building up a network of illustrators that I work with. So I've got a few that I haven't worked with yet, just because I don't have another project, but if anyone wants a recommendation, let me know and I can point them in a couple of directions.
Nice. So I was going to say that we will put in the show notes, it's not a podcast, but on YouTube, we'll put a link to your book. We'll link to the first book in the series of the Supply Jane series. But how else can people get in touch with you or learn more about you and your books that are coming out? Because I know you have more coming.
You can subscribe to my Substack, as we were just talking about, and it is entropycottage.substack.com. Entropy Cottage is the name of my publishing house, so you should be able to find me there.
Nice. Great. Thank you, Megan. We will share that in the show notes. And thanks for coming on and sharing your story. And you had a lot of great information about the process and marketing and all of that, which I think is really helpful to all authors out there. So thank you for sharing all that with us.
Yeah, thank you. This was really fun.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors. Learn more at kellyshuckneck.com.